A situation in knitting that I particularly despise and try and avoid like the plague is the situation where you have to join the heads of two pieces of ribbing together. This is a piece of 1x1 rib and this is a piece of 1x1 rib. They've been knit in these directions and now the stitches are coming head to head. This is the sort of situation you might find with some kind of cardigan bands. And I think I've found an elegant solution. They're usually very nasty to join together because they won't line up properly. So I've taken a little element of double knitting here and I've grafted the knits on one side together and I've grafted the knits on the other side together. It isn't perfect, but visually it's pretty impressive. All you have is this very slight indentation at the edge. It's a dip rather than a joggle. And visually it looks just fine. If that were sewn in white, you'd hardly know the difference. We prepare to make the join by dividing the two layers of stitches, the knits and the purls. So take two receiving needles and slip the knits onto one and the purls onto the other. It's helpful if the needles are a little smaller than gauge size and double pointed. And remember that circulars are just giant floppy double points. Now position the two samples, there are the two layers of each one. Position the two samples side by side and go into your first stitch, and I'm starting at the messy edge and I'm going in as if to knit and then as if to purl into the next stitch. And I'm leaving a tail to finish that edge off later. Then over to the other two stitches, and this time I'm going in purlwise and then from the back of the loop. You could actually put these on a thread of yarn rather than on a knitting needle. And all I'm doing here is a regular stocking stitch graft. So back into the front of that stitch, purlwise into the next one. And the advantage of starting with a loose piece of yarn like this is if I don't get my start quite correct, then I can always redo this particular end. Once you get going, it should look perfect, just like a regular stocking stitch graft. Getting the needles out of the way, and you can see that it's helpful to have slightly smaller needles because then you can see inside the stitches. So into the back of that stitch or down from above, then up from behind here. It's hard to define what exactly the right words are, but it should make the two stitches you're sewing look like a happy knit stitch, even though there's a purl tucked away in between them. I'm really just treating these like two separate layers of stocking stitch. It's always back to where you came from and into the next loop. Try and adjust the sewn stitches to the same size and shape as their cousins in the knitting, and I'm just going to go back to that starting edge and finish this off. Once more into there, and that's as far as we can go in that direction. Now this far end, we're going to turn the work over, and you can see we've done a regular stocking stitch graft in there, and now we're going to resume on this next side. So I'm going to come into the back of that stitch, then back into this one again. So that's the side of the previous layer from front to back. Up in the next stitch, And all the time you're looking at your sewing, it should look just like a regular stocking stitch graft. And it is a compromise. They are slightly out of alignment, but it will look a lot better than many of the other methods that you might try. For more on grafting and using waste yarn in grafting, see my Finesse Your Knitting 1 DVD. Now I'm nearly at the end of this row. I'm into the last stitch on the top piece and back into there one more time. They won't line up perfectly because the stitches are out of alignment when you put stitches head to head, but it's a pretty good compromise. So if that were all white, you'd hardly notice it, and even the indentation at the side isn't very significant.